spirit of reconciliation, the Australian Childcare Alliance Victoria acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and Victoria and their connections to the land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Just a little brief rundown of how today is going to work. We've just got an introduction and news and events of what's going on. And then we have a word from our sponsors from Childcare Super. And we have accessing DET workforce support, a word from the VIT, and then an update on the ACA Advocacy that we've been doing over the last few months for you as well, from Paul, our ACA National President, and Vic, Vice President. And then we'll be hanging around for some Q&As and whatever afterwards, if anyone else wants to have a chat with us at the end of today's session. So we have some sobering news, some not so good news, and some updates to give you today. So we were going to be having a stall at the Careers Expo in July this month, which unfortunately the Careers Expo have postponed on us until the 15th to 17th of July next year. So obviously 15th, 17th July is past for this year. And so
well, she can
whoever's just joined,
please and see how she goes.
Really loud. So because that's still nearly 12 months away, we will be over the coming weeks preparing a list of services that are prepared to or would be welcoming to take onboarding people that are interested in taking training. And Philippa is going to be working on developing a website to go along with our Careers Expo, which will be having our stall at next year. So if anyone's interested or currently takes trainees or is interested in taking on trainees over the next and wanting to be on that list, we encourage you to send through your information through, and Philippa will add your information and anything you'd like to be added to onto that website, and we can, certainly help those services, and then you can help the potential trainees in, so that we can look at encouraging job seekers into a career in the early learning sector. That's update one. Update two is our early learning leader summit that we were looking at doing on the 20th of August. Yesterday, Crown contacted us to say that all the events in August were being rescheduled. So unfortunately, we won't be able to have our summit this year in August. All the dates that they were able to provide us with potentially for the remainder of 2020 were midweek, which wasn't really going to work for most of the providers that we'd already discussed with. So at this stage, we are tentatively looking at the 1st of April for next year. That's still to be confirmed, so don't hold us to that date as yet. But we are still working with Crown and sponsors and service providers, etc., to see whether that date's going to work. Anyone that's already purchased tickets that doesn't work for will be able to get full refunds. Anyone that wants to post to carry their purchased tickets across will obviously, we can keep those on board until we actually are able to hold the event sometime early next year. And hopefully that will go ahead and it'll be a fantastic event, and we'll have lots of really engaging speakers, and it'll be a really good networking event when we actually get around to having it. And hopefully being earlier in the year next year when the weather's better and hopefully COVID disappears and we've got a lot higher vaccination rates, and we'll actually all be able to sit around tables together and have really good conversations. And those of you that came down to Mornington earlier in the year, we had our first retreat. It was really good to actually get face to face and actually be able to see people. So we really were looking forward to actually being able to get out and have people together again and being able to do something face to face. Just really unfortunate that we seem to be back in deja vu land like we were this time last year again. Hopefully we aren't stuck in our houses and our offices and things for as long as we were last year. Fingers crossed. Next update will be, fingers crossed again, that our AGM in November will be face to face. hopefully this year we'll be face to face. We won't be doing it remotely. And next fingers crossed is that I'll actually be able to present it this year, and I won't be waiting for back surgery like I was last year, which is the reason why Paul had to do it for us last year. Then if we have any of our current members that are interested in joining the board or putting their feelers out to see what's involved in joining the board, we're more than happy to speak to potential board members. We're not saying that we have anyone wanting to vacate board positions, but we're always looking to for people that are wanting to be involved in running ACA and knowing what it's all about, and what's involved in keeping our sector going and making things better for everybody. That's what's been going on within the back of house in the last couple of weeks while COVID's been running around. Generally in the sector, just for the last little bit that we may not have been able to put out to you in our updates just recently, the Kims has just been reopened this week, which hopefully you've all been given updates through from email. If you haven't, when we can forward you out the emails to let you know what's going on with that, because there's a couple of quite tight timeframes that the Kims have given us to make sure that things are done. So we've got the Census week, which obviously last year we didn't have to do because of COVID and we were in the middle of lockdowns. Census week this year is the 2nd to the 6th of August, which is the week after next, and we'll open on the 9th of August. So we've got 2 weeks basically to make sure that all our information is up to date. The right children that are still there are entered, the new children that have come in the last few months since we did our annual confirmation are actually in there, so we can make sure we've got those ones in. Any teacher changes are being reflected. And the other one, which is even tighter change, is any ESK children, the tracker, the ESK tracker that needs to be done for term 2. So their attendance trackers is going to open until the 30th of July. Then that'll be closed off. And that's obviously for children for term 2 and any late applications for term 1 as well. So that's the update on the Kims. Then I think it was also yesterday, there was an email that came out to say that the Education and Care National Amendment to Regulations, we have the Display of Quality Ratings amendment coming into effect on the 30th of July, that the services need to make sure that your actual, there's always been a regulation to display your quality rating, but the change is that the quality rating now needs to be visible from the main entrance of the service. So that's basically the gist of the change. A lot of services have nice big foyers, might actually display it not visible from the main entrance. It might be sort of around the corridor somewhere else with the quality area, so the rest of your quick display, etc., etc. That's the main gist of that amendment change. And the other one, which affects us on the 1st of October, is the transportation of children. That came through from a secret email on Monday, not yesterday, sorry, that was Monday. And then the SEQUA's also put out some guidelines for policies, and they've done 12 of them so far, and there'll be another 16 coming through. So they've given us guidelines as to what needs to be put into policy development and reviews, and given us quite good guidelines into what needs to actually be in them. So I think they're really stepping up the game as to what actually really needs to be included into the policies, and probably more relevant for new services than current ones. If you've got policies already developed, they're expecting that the policies are regularly reviewed, which obviously we will do every year. But they've given quite good guidelines now to consider, and referencing back to state-specific. Let me pull up the up here. So they've given medical. So far, they've done medical conditions, emergency evacuations, some that relate to family daycare, which some of you may have, but doesn't relate to as many of us. Incident, injury, trauma, illness, providing child-safe environments, sleep and rest, water safety, and the other one's a family daycare. So they go policy guidelines, including backgrounds, legislative requirements, principles to inform your policy, key terms. Each of their policies are about 10 pages each now. So they're quite involved policies, whereas some of our policies before used to be, might have been quite short. There's quite involved and quite in-depth, which does take a considerable amount of time and effort every year to be reviewing policies. And if it's not something you think that you actually have time to do, I'd probably recommend that you consider Childcare Centre Desktop, which is one of our partners, who for an annual subscription of a reduced rate for our partnership for $317, you have access to their full suite of policies, forms, newsletters, etc., which you can then tailor to your own needs if need be. I'm not saying you don't have to, I'm just saying that they're there and available if you would like to go that way. But they do one section each month, so you can then review them yourself after they've done all that background that the department requires that is done to start off with. Anyway, that's the sector news from me. The rest of it is something that Paul will talk about a little bit later in the advocacy section. And that was my little brief introduction. I think I've stuck pretty much to time. Now, I will introduce Rosemary Wardle, who's the client partnership executive with Childcare Super, who has a few words to say for us as well this morning. So welcome, Rose.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for allowing Childcare Super to partner and sponsor these events, something that we are very excited and proud to do. I'm just going to give you a brief, some brief insights of what's happening with Super and what is changing. There are a few legislative changes that have started and some that are in play for next year. I know there was a bit of a confusion about, when rates are being up, so I will hopefully go through that today. If anyone does have any questions, please, my number is at the end of these slides. Give me a call, or if for some reason you don't get my number, I'm sure Pip can pass it on to everybody. So the information I'm giving to you today isn't financial advice. It's just a disclaimer. I'm not a financial planner, so I can't give you financial advice. It's just some general information. Okay, so the recent budget announcements. So in the budget 21-22, it was announced that the government will remove the minimum 450 monthly income thresholds. So from next year, so this is one that a few people did question, is it from this year or from next year? But no, it's from next year. Employers will have to pay superannuation guarantee contributions to all eligible employees aged 18 years and under, regardless of what they earn. Okay, so once again, this is from next year. From the 1st of July, not from this year. Okay, they've made expansions to the First Home Super Saver Scheme. So this is from the 1st of July 2022. If you're a first home buyer, you can release up to 50,000. It was currently 30, but they are going to up that to 50,000. So that's really good for people that are trying to get into the market, especially in these crazy times. And in the May 2021 budget, the government announced that from the 1st of July 2022, the age at which you can become eligible to make a downsized contribution will reduce from 65 to age 60. So this hasn't passed through Parliament as yet, but it's what they're wanting to happen. Okay, thanks, Sarah. So the next thing I just wanted to briefly talk about is the low and middle income tax offset. So the low and middle income earners may be eligible for the low income tax offset. The ATO will work out this offset when your employees or you lodge your tax return, and then this will automatically be rebated into your superannuation account when it is completed. Now, that's something that's important because a lot of people think, oh, this money goes into your bank account. No, it goes into your superannuation account. Okay, thanks, Sarah. So, and this will affect you, most of you. So for all business that have an annual turnover or income of up to 5 billion are eligible to deduct full costs of assets. This has been extended to the 30th of June 2023. It's a good idea to speak to your accountant to see if you are eligible, as there is a lot of criteria involved to claim any of this. So if it's something that you think you are eligible for, please speak to your accountant and see if you are eligible for it. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so this is just the increases in super that will be taking place. So hopefully everyone's looked at this. So as of the 1st of July 2021 to the 30th of June, super will go up to 10%. Okay, and as you can see, it does increase in increments every year after, and it will stop at 12% at this point in time as of the 1st of July 2027. So that's something just to keep forward. So this is just what you would need in super for a comfortable lifestyle. Now, people always say to me, what's a comfortable lifestyle? For a single person, it's $850 per week. Okay, and this comes from the ASFA retirement standards of living. So yeah, it's $850 per week. So if you're just putting the minimum in, and that's what they're suggesting that you would need to retire on, including the age pension in that $850. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so this is just how to get started. I know I always talk about this, but I'm just finding it really important now, especially within our industries, because a lot of people have taken their money out because of financial hardship through the last 2 years because of COVID. And I get the questions, how do I get it back up there? What do I need to do? So, you know, as an employer, you need to choose a default fund that suits your business plus also your employees. That we need to think about putting extra in your super. Now, I know a lot of people think, God, how am I going to do that at this crazy time? I will give you some options in a moment. You can look at, and I don't always suggest it the best idea, but you can look at bringing all your super funds into one. Log in and check your contributions. All funds have member online where you can get in and check your contributions. I actually really think this is important to do, because when I go out and speak to staff and I ask them, you know, how much have you got in your super, I get the shrug. Okay, so it is important that you and your staff go in and check your superannuation and make sure that it is all there. Check your insurance cover. Check if you are insured for the correct amounts, because, you know, yes, you get insurance cover with super, but you do pay for that as well. So check what the cost is as well. That's really important to look at. Learn about the different types of investments, what's best for you, and you need help. You need to know where to go to get advice. Okay, as I said, we can give you general advice, but you know, you can get some intra-fund advice, but you can also speak to a financial planner as well. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so this is just COVID recovery plan where you or your staff could go to just get some information and getting a calculator. So if you go onto the Money Smart website, they can help you with that, and they can help you get back on track with your retirement savings. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so how to boost your super? There are a few ways. So obviously your employer, or you put in the 10%. If you're self-employed, you may want to put extra in. Salary sacrifice contribution. So this is after-tax contributions, and this will actually help get your taxable income down as well. Okay, voluntary contributions. So depending on what your salary is, you can actually get the government contributions to help you make extra in your superannuation. There's spouse contributions, once again, the consolidations of your super funds. Now with childcare super, and I'll go into it a bit more for those that haven't heard, I'll be surprised if anyone hasn't heard about super, but we also have super, which is unique to childcare super. Thanks, Sarah. So what makes us so different? So we listen to what our members have to say. We know that it's hard to get super and to make extra contributions, so they want more in their super account. So we've looked at that and we've seen how we can help them with that. We've heard what our employers have said on what they need. So we've actually got a few things that we're working on. We've got a financial wellbeing program that we're looking at bringing out. We've changed all our employer portals to make it easier. And just something that's not on this slide, but something that I have since we've moved over to this new employer portal that I've realised is quite concerning for me. A lot of employers go in and make superannuation payments to 10 different funds and they think that they need to log into each fund to make that payment, you only need to use the one portal. So at Childcare Super, if you use our employer portal, you can just jump in, you can upload the information yourself, or you can put a SAF file in, and we will pay all funds for you. So you don't need to log into 10, 12, 30 different portals. We can do that all for you just on that one portal. And other super funds will offer that as well. I've just noticed that is a bit of concern because I've got employers that say, oh, I need to log into this one for 2 employees and this one for another 3. You can just use the one portal to do that. Thanks, Sarah. So this is Super. So you've probably heard us all talking about this. So this is our rewards program that we offer to our members, where we've got over 100 retailers that are willing to give our members discounts or rewards. And these rewards go into your superannuation. So let's say, for example, you go and you shop at Coles. Every cent you spend at Coles through Super, 4% will go into your superannuation. Coles is just one of them. There's Woolworths, there's JB Hi-Fi. As I said, there's over 100. There's petrol stations. So it's actually a really good way to put money in your super without doing anything other than what we normally do, and it's shopping. I know a lot of centre owners that actually go and shop for their centre and use Super and up their account balance. Or you could also give it as a recognition to your director or one of your valued staff members saying, hey, use the company credit card, link it to your Super account, and money can go into your super. So if you want more on that, please do not hesitate to contact me. Unfortunately, at the moment, I can't come out and speak to you, but I can do a Zoom meeting or send you more information. Thanks, Sarah. So, you know, this is how Super can make a difference to a member's account. So, you know, this information's based on a 34-year-old with $34,000 in her account. If she uses Super 25% of the time, she'll have about $33,000 extra when she retires. If she was to use it 50% of the time, she'd have $61,000 extra. And if she was to use it 100% of the time, they would have $105,000 extra. So it can make a big difference just by doing what we do every day. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. For those of you that are Childcare Super members, you would have known we've actually changed our websites. We're changing a lot of things at the moment. We're trying to be more innovative and going more digital to make it easier for our members. So, you know, I advise that if you are a Childcare Super member and you haven't done so, jump onto Childcare Super, go log into Member Online. There's lots of blogs on there that can actually help you with financial wellbeing and just understanding a little bit more about Super. Thanks, Sarah. And these are my contact details. So if anyone does want to contact me, have a chat, whether it be about superannuation within the business or just for your personal needs with superannuation, please feel free to give me a call. I am available. I am available out of hours. So, you know, I know you all busy. So, you know, if at 6 o'clock you think, oh, I need to ring Rose, I need to speak about super, please feel free to give me a call. You know, I do answer my phone at 7 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, if you do feel that you need to ring me, please don't hesitate. Just give me a call. Thank you all for listening and hope to speak to you all shortly. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Rose. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks once again, Rose. I can personally vouch for Super. It's certainly helped me boost my superannuation account by, I think, about $4,000 so far over the time I've been using it. Certainly added to my funds at the moment. Anyway, I'd now like to introduce Catherine O'Keefe, Catherine O'Keefe, Director of Kindergarten Reform Implementation from the Department of Education and Training, and Emma Gee, Manager of Workforce Policy Team from the Department of Education and Training. Hopefully they are both with us. Are you both with us?
Yes, hi Sarah, I'm here, and
here.
Kat's here as well.
I'm here as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Just a little bit slow on the mute button, that's okay. As always.
With a great big long list of people, I was trying to scroll through, and fantastic. I will pass on to you then, and I will mute myself. Thank you.
Now, if you stop sharing your screen, Sarah, I can share the slides that I've got here
No worries.
as well.
I will do that. There you go.
Just bear with me while I do this. Okay, sorry. So hopefully everybody can see that. I'm going to run just quickly through a little bit of the support that we've got to support recruitment for services that are rolling out 3-year-old kindergarten next year. I'll pass over to Kat to talk a little bit about long-term sort of workforce planning and retention, and we'll try and leave some time for some questions at the end as well.
And Em, just before you start, probably we should say there's quite a bit of detail in these slides, and they have lots of links in them to go to for more information. So we're happy to, rather than you trying to scribble things down as you're going, we're very happy to kind of leave the slides with Pip and Paul and have them circulated to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess sort of starting off with thinking about modelling. Hopefully lots of you have already started thinking about your delivery model and how you're going to deliver a 3-year-old kindergarten program next year. Obviously, choosing the right delivery model is really critical to maximise enrolments, to make sure that you're using your staffing as efficiently as possible, and also to support the financial viability of your service. So these decisions are really important ones. There are obviously lots of different options that will work for different services and different communities. But I guess particularly from a workforce perspective, it's worth thinking through things like mixed age groups, because that can be a really efficient way of making sure that your groups are full and that you're getting as many kids in as possible and using your sort of existing teachers as efficiently as possible. Another thing to have a think about sort of when you're thinking about staffing is talking to existing staff and whether they might be interested in increasing their hours. We know from our surveys that we've done that there are lots of teachers out there that are interested in doing that. And I think the 5-hour programs next year really is an opportunity to sort of meet that extra need with existing staffing. So I'd really encourage you to think about those options first. I've got a link down the bottom here to the 3-year-old kindergarten teaching toolkit. So that's some resources that are available for teaching teams to support planning and delivery of 3-year-old kindergarten programs. And specifically in relation to modelling, it's got some really useful fact sheets with some ideas about, for example, mixed age groups and how to support learning in large groups and things like that. So there's a link in there. And also your local early childhood improvement branch. There's one in all of the areas across the state. So they are a really great resource for questions about staffing and modelling and planning for program delivery for next year. We do know that there will be lots of services that will need to recruit new staff next year. And one of the things that government's recently announced is some new incentives to increase the number of qualified early childhood teachers that we have in the early childhood sector in Victoria. So there's new incentives of $9,000 that are available for qualified ECTs who are either moving from interstate or from New Zealand, or who have been employed outside of the early childhood sector. So if you know anyone who's left the sector and might be convinced to come back, this is a really great opportunity for them. So please share this around. There's also opportunities to think about how, if you do have a vacancy, you might be able to promote those to those cohorts and promote the incentives that they will be able to access. Down on the bottom of this slide, there are links to some tips for successfully recruiting staff. Some of the things to think about when you're writing up job applications or thinking about how to promote your service. We've also got some sample job advertisements that you can use, and we're in the process of updating that content. So there is content that's available to use now, and we'll be getting some sort of updated content out to you very soon. We've also recently announced the Early Childhood Jobs Board. So this is a website that's got job listings for positions in early childhood education and care services across Victoria. So that's free to use. I guess we know it can be expensive advertising vacancies through other avenues. So this is something that's free. And we will be doing lots of promotion of that to the workforce and the potential workforce as well. So we've got some advertising that'll be coming out soon to really highlight those incentives and to promote the jobs board. We've included a link to our website as well that's got more information about all of those things on there too. For services that have particular difficulty in recruiting, we've got a bit of extra targeted recruitment support that will be available as well. So like we've had in the earlier rollout years, we've got what we're calling location incentives of between $9,000 and $50,000. So they're incentives that are allocated to particular services that are in either hard to staff rural areas or particular services across metropolitan Melbourne as well. So we will be letting those services know if they've been allocated those incentives in the next few weeks. We also will have some recruitment agency support available for services that are really struggling as well. So that's not something that's going to be available for everybody, but it will be available to, yeah, those services that are really finding it particularly difficult. So I've just included a reminder here that if you're really struggling to recruit staff for next year, please do reach out to us, either to your local early childhood improvement branch, or there's an email address down the bottom there that you can contact as well. I'll pass over to Kat now to talk about longer term things.
Thank you, Emma, and I'm still struggling to find the mute button in good time, so sorry about the clunky handover between the two of us. So obviously there's a range of actions that service providers themselves can be taking to plan for and secure longer term workforce, including by supporting existing educators to upskill to become early childhood teachers. The department has a range of quite generous financial supports available for upskillers to undertake their university qualifications, and there's links to where to find out more about that. We also have our accelerated early childhood education program, which is currently running with Deakin, which allows upskillers to complete their university study in a compressed timeframe of around 18 months. The Deakin course is kind of a pilot course at the moment, but we're looking to kind of explore other innovative models like that with other universities. So hopefully we'll have more to say about that in the future. There's work that providers can do in terms of supporting staff to navigate the university system. It's quite a complicated system, I'm sure many of you know from previous experience. Also, hosting work placements is another really important way to support upskillers in general, but also for services to be identifying and finding kind of a pipeline of talent yourselves. There's work that can be done in engaging the local community members to take up a career in early childhood by increasing awareness about the different types of careers that are available in early childhood education, and the department has pulled together kind of a bunch of resources which are linked in these slides to try and support that. There's also kind of potential to do more innovative work, building partnerships with schools and TAFEs and RTOs. At the moment, the department has a bunch of kind of longer term quality and retention supports that are available. For kind of early career teachers has been a bit of a focus for us lately. So we've got a bunch of beginning teacher conferences that are available to support kind of those teachers who are in their early careers. They're kind of free for people to attend, and there's kind of a bunch of information about how to register for those on the DET website, which is kind of, there's a link to that in the next slide. We've got a series of grants available to support provisionally registered teachers to move to full registration with the Victorian Institute of Teaching. Those grants include funding for things like time to work with a mentor, time release, travel if that's required for the mentee and the mentor to be working together. We've got some end-to-end career supports that are available. More information on where to go for more on that is linked on the next slide as well, but that includes some individual coaching support for first year teachers, as well as communities of practice for second and third year teachers, an alumni network, and some innovation grants where we're kind of open to service providers coming to us and saying what you think would make a difference for retention in your service. And there's quite a significant amount of funding available for you to kind of pilot different things. There's early learning leadership forums and early years learning networks, and they're designed for practitioners to really have the opportunity to network with their peers and engage directly with the department and experts in the field. I'm sure this one isn't really that new, but school readiness funding, plug for that again. Under school readiness funding, services are able to select kind of the most appropriate professional development supports for their staff to best meet the needs of the children that they're supporting at that time. We've also got the kindergarten quality improvement program in place, which has a real focus on improving governance and leadership. And then, as Emma mentioned earlier, there's the 3-year-old kindergarten teaching toolkit, which includes both professional development, but also a bunch of written resources to support kind of planning and delivery of programs. So that's a bit of a cook's tour, a high-level cook's tour of the supports that we've got available. The next slide has a bunch of really helpful links that we can that we'll obviously give to you as part of this pack if you want to go and find out more. But I might stop talking now and open it up for any questions. No questions?
There's one in the chat I can see.
Hi. Hello, I'm Galina. I do have a question regarding early childhood teacher. Catherine and Emma, thank you so much for your slides and the presentation. It's been great. Do you know what would be the best situation in as our scenario? We do have a qualified teacher from overseas. She holds Masters in Education and degree in education from Poland. Which way should we go? Should we just directly approach a CICFA for her qualifications haven't been recognized 10 years ago when she migrated, and she hasn't tried again, and she's currently our 3-year-old kinder teacher, and we would love her to remain being in this position as she's extremely incredible educator. So what would be the best way for us to approach and get her qualifications recognized?
Kat, do you want me to respond to that one?
Sure.
I mean, look, I guess I'm not an expert in this and can't give you specific advice, but yeah, contacting a CICFA to find out if your qualifications are recognised is obviously the first step. And if they're not, then yeah, there might be some options for her to, I guess, sort of upskill and get a local qualification that will allow her to be an early childhood teacher.
It's been a meeting.
we do have on our website a study map that lists all of the courses and has links to universities, so that might be somewhere to start having a look about what some of the options are for her.
Thank you, Emma.
And Madeline, Scott, I'm so sorry that you had such a frustrating experience with Smarty grants. We'll check in about reapplying after the due date and come back to you via PIP, if that's okay.
I've got a question. It's actually not really a question, it's more of a statement whilst we're talking about the shortage of staff. I've got 2 ECTs who are on visas at the moment and have been with me for 4 years, you know, have been here for 6 years, have completed all the applications and are just basically waiting for PR. They did get accepted for a COVID visa, which is valid until April next year, but potentially they're quite anxious. I have spoken to some MPs and I have spoken to others, and I know that you're probably not in the best position to help, but I just wanted to feed back that we've got some amazing teachers working in the sector, yet they're not on the list of people that are going to be invited to stay and things like that. So potentially I'm going to lose both of those teachers at the end of this year. Is there some way this could be fed back to Home Affairs or something, that there is a shortage of ECT teachers, and that so that way the federal government can recognise that they can also make an impact with that? I'm not sure what the numbers are across the state, but I have 2. So I'd like to keep them if I can and not go through the whole recruitment process. Yeah.
Absolutely understandable. Em, did you want to talk a bit about the work that we've been doing via DJPR?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I was just going to say that, yes, we are aware of this being an issue in Victoria, and I know that it's not only your service that's impacted by that. We have been working with DJPR on some options, which you know, there's nothing I can share on that as yet, but it's something that we're really hoping to progress some options for early childhood teachers in Victoria. I know it's also come up as part of the National Workforce Strategy consultation that's underway at the moment, and that there's ongoing advocacy to the Commonwealth around that as well.
Okay, what's DJPR?
Sorry, another Victorian government department, the Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions, who they have kind of lead responsibility for negotiating with the Commonwealth on kind of broader visa issues.
Emma, can you just put into the comments maybe the link to the website or the name so we all can copy?
Sorry, which website did you want?
Just the organization you're mentioning, if you can just put into the comments.
So the department?
Yeah, and maybe the website.
Yeah, sure.
Hello. I would like to also share the same view regarding the shortage of early childhood teachers in our sector, and it's all around the country. It would not just be in Victoria. Previously, if we were to initiate one of those, I think the category of visa is 482. Employers did not have to pay a contribution of the $8,000, but currently for us to do that, it's very expensive. We have to pay upfront that $8,000 before we can progress with the application. In hand at the moment, I would have at least 10 applications, and you can imagine it's $80,000 upfront ahead, and we're experiencing great shortage. So yes, I share the same view. We would greatly appreciate if this voice could be provided to the Department of Immigration urgently for conditions of employer nomination to be relaxed. At the moment, we have people who are on visas leaving, not enough people coming into the country. This I know is sort of a common a problem for many other sectors of business, you know, hospitality everywhere. Another thing I would like to check is prior to that, I mean, to this situation, there's people who are on study visa, they have a limitation that they can only work, sort of student visa, 20 hours. Has that been relaxed so that they can now work more hours if they are available, or if they are able to take on online studies or remote studies?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you do, Kat. We're not sort of migration experts, I'm afraid.
Understand, yeah.
Hi, Sian, it's Paul. I can, in terms of that ask, we don't believe it has been relaxed in ECEC yet, but we actually have written to the federal government asking for that relaxation to apply, particularly in the current climate.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And also, I think other than, I mean, from what I was just saying about the 482 employer nomination, I mean, there are sort of many other categories. I mean, you know, like, for example, the training visa, so on. We're just really hoping that the government understands our sort of challenges and are able to support us in every way in terms of progressing with any form of nomination and visas for these early childhood teachers to be able to stay in the country. Thank you.
Hello, just one question. I can see in comments that Rhonda asked a question in regards to the working towards the qualification, if it's still standing or it's relaxed, because I've got a teacher who has qualification from the ACA as recognized Masters in Education. However, she needs to go through English test, and with the lockdown, every test is delayed. So what are we doing with all this delayed qualifications as VIT registration?
Sorry, could you clarify what you mean by that? Are you talking about delays with the English tests for VIT?
Yes. So in order to have VIT registration, the overseas qualified teachers, they have to pass the English test. And they actually can't do it right now with the lockdowns, and it has been delayed. So the question from Rhonda was that so basically it is working towards the qualification, as these teachers are not recognized as VIT. So are we okay to employ them as VIT registered, or what is the rule about it? Because it is very confusing for us and for staff what they actually entitled to.
I can probably answer that question. Sorry, I'm from VIT and I'll be presenting to you later on, but you have to be provisionally registered to undertake the duties of a teacher. So if they're working towards, they can't actually take up the duties of a teacher until that registration comes through.
So in the website, it says that if you've got more than 50 children in your childcare preschool age, so you have to have one VIT and the suitable person who is working 50% or more towards the registration. So is it, so are we okay with that? If she's got Masters in Education, but she is not passed her IELTS test, so she's actually, is it qualifying her for working with children?
That's a working towards ECT.
Sorry?
That's a working towards ECT.
Correct.
Yes, so that's for regulation. Yes, that's okay. But not for funding, for kindergarten funding. If that's the question you're asking, Arena. Yes, you're fine for regulation. You're fine for meeting the ratio requirements, but you wouldn't be fine for funding requirements.
So anybody that's employed as a teacher needs to have the qualifications of a teacher, provisional or above. So
there's two separate requirements in Victoria. Yep. There's the regulations under the Education and Care Act, the regulations, and then there's the funding requirements under the Kindergarten Funding Guide.
Yeah, so
Yes.
basically we have a huge shortage, and I definitely agree with everyone else, as we do have a few who are qualified as degree in education. However, they can't complete their registration, and that's where we're lacking it at the moment, just as a feedback.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly what that was my question that I put in the chat box. So thanks for clarifying that. I thought it was the way that it was a teacher, but I just thought I'd ask.
No worries. Okay, this could be a perfect segue to introduce Linda Blackus from the Victorian Institute of Teaching, who is going to talk to us a bit more about how the VIT can support the registration process, I do believe, for early teachers. Do you have slides that you'd like to share as well?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. I won't re-share your introduction screen, and I'll let you get straight into it. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. So my name is Linda Blakers. I am the Professional Practice Manager at the Victorian Institute of Teaching. My background is as a secondary trained teacher. My last substantive role with the department was as an assistant principal in a large P12 complex in the Northern Growth Corridor of Melbourne. And I've been with VIT now for a period of 3 years. My work in schools was working predominantly with early career teachers, and so it was a nice little segue into VIT. The process of teachers moving their practice from provisional to provisional to full registration, is the same for all teachers. So obviously all teaching is contextual, and we need to take account of context. And it's really timely after the last presentation that we're here today just to talk about that process, just to make you as leaders aware of what their requirements are for teachers when they're in this space. And of course, we have a lot of new people coming into the system, and we want to keep them. And so that workplace support is absolutely vital for us to be able to do that. So I'm just going to take you through a few things today, and I am very mindful of the time, so I'm going to do a bit of talking at you, and I apologise in advance for that. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time for some questions at the end. However, we will be at the summit, and so if you have any additional questions and things like that, you'll be able to seek us out, and we'll be able to hopefully have a face-to-face chat. So just before I continue, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Just today, we're just going to go through some of the compliance requirements for teachers in early childhood settings, very, very quickly about the registration process and the inquiry approach, really the background to the inquiry approach, so that people understand why this process is actually there and sort of what we can do to support that process, and understanding what, as employers and leaders in that the sector, obviously, you can do to support your staff moving forward. Our purpose in VIT, not surprising, we are the regulator, so we would like to obviously regulate for a highly qualified, proficient and reputable teaching profession. And that measure of proficiency is basically through the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, which are national standards, and it is expected that all teachers will become proficient in their practice, and I'll talk a little bit about that process moving forward. We also have, with recent changes to legislation, picked up a very explicit child protection function. It's always been there, but not as explicitly stated as it now is. And so in everything that we do, we have to consider the wellbeing and safety of children, including by taking into account community expectations, and that links directly to the revised code of conduct, which hopefully you have all received, the revised code, but also the support pack that came out at the beginning of term 2, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. So just to make sure that everyone's clear on what VIT actually does, because there is some confusion out there, our predominant function is to register teachers and early childhood teachers. That's our main purpose. As part of that, as being a regulated profession, there are standards of professional practice that are expected by the community, and these are national standards, as I said, through the APST. Sometimes we do have to investigate conduct, competence and fitness to teach matters because we want to make sure that we have the most suitable people in charge of our children. We don't approve early childhood programs. We do approve all other teacher education programs, but we work very closely with ACEQA and recognise the ACEQA approved programs. And we develop that code of conduct and ethics. It's one of our legislative functions. A lot of people think that we are a teacher advocacy body and that we have some influence under employment matters. We don't. Our relationship in registration is directly with the teachers, but it's important that we work closely with employers to make sure that you understand, or they understand, that there are particular requirements that teachers need to meet to be able to maintain their registration, and they do need the support of the workplace in being able to do that. So we're not an assessor or accreditor of early childhood settings. That's not us at all. You can't opt in to be a member of VIT. So we're not a membership organisation as such. You have to be registered with VIT if you are to teach in Victoria. And we're not, as I said, a teacher advocacy or an industrial organisation, and it's not appropriate for us as the regulator to be dabbling in that space. So as I mentioned, we are a standards-based regulator. These are the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers, national standards. All teachers that are in an approved initial teacher education course, so they're student teachers, they are working towards the graduate level of the standards. So when they graduate, they are deemed to have met the graduate level of these Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. And if you look at what the difference is between them, they look very similar, same 3 domains, same 7 standards. But the graduate level of the APST is about knowing and understanding the standards. So it's a very theoretical look at the APST, which when you're doing your courses, of course, that you do some practicum, but a lot of it is very theoretically based. When teachers are have graduated and they're in that provisional period of their registration, that's the time where they need to move their practice. So they're moving from that graduate level of knowing and understanding to actually putting these things into practice within their rooms. So the language of the standards change. It goes from knowing and understanding to setting, developing, using, enabling. There's a whole range of things that obviously are about what happens within a classroom, and it mirrors what teachers know and do in their day-to-day work. And so teachers need to be practicing to be able to demonstrate proficiency, and that demonstration of proficiency is what the inquiry process that I'm about to talk to you about is all about. So this gives VIT the assurance that not only are our teachers suitably qualified, but that they are meeting the the standards that are expected for all teachers within that profession. And then in turn, we can reassure the community that the teachers that are in front of our children are meeting those expected standards. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So registration, provisional registration is for a period of 2 years. And as I said, that's that time for them to develop their practice in a supported environment. We do know that sometimes people aren't able to meet their requirements within those 2 years. COVID, for instance, has created lots of issues for some people. And so it is possible for teachers to be able to apply for a further period of provisional registration should they require it, and they do that through their MyVIT portals. Before a teacher can apply for full registration, they must have completed at least 80 days in any Australian or New Zealand school or service. So they don't need to do all of their 80 days at your service, for instance. You might have somebody that has come to you and you've had them at your service for 40 days. You're going to do a panel for them and help them through the process, but you'll need to ask them for evidence that they have actually completed those other 40 days elsewhere. So it's their responsibility to keep track of those and to make sure they can show you either pay slips or attestations of service or those sorts of things. Then when they're ready, when they have moved their practice, that's when they undertake the process of inquiry, which will allow them to demonstrate all of those descriptors in the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. So it's designed to be an example of how teachers can really affect positive change and improvement for their learners. And it's the means by which teachers can demonstrate that they've moved their practice from graduate to proficient. So the process itself won't move their practice. They have to pretty much have already done that. This is just a process where they demonstrate. So they teach, they gather evidence along the way, and then they present their evidence to a workplace panel in your workplace, who will then make a decision about whether or not they've met all of those particular standards. So we've done some surveying of provisionally registered teachers, or PRTs, as we tend to refer to them as. These are people that have done it in the past, gone through the process over the past 3 years. So this is inclusive of both early childhood and school teachers. And you can see that people they do find the process very helpful. They talk about that they are going to continue to use this process of inquiry. It does mirror a lot of improvement models that workplaces use anyway. So if they're not using this process, they're using something very similar to it. I was looking at the FISO stuff the other day, different wording, same sort of process, looking at the early years framework as well, very, very similar. And so this is something that will mirror what's happening in the workplace anyway, and they can leverage off that. You can see that it's really, if they're focusing in on the needs of the learners, which is what this is all about, and that their questions of inquiry that they develop are still relevant beyond that process, and they just continue with that process moving forward, because we want them to be really reflective and adaptive practitioners. The ideas of mentors, having mentors to support them through this process, is really, really important. And while early childhood teachers haven't been registered as long as school teachers have, the early childhood space has done a fantastic job in making sure that mentors are being trained up. We're getting large numbers of early childhood teachers coming along to our mentor training sessions. And the availability of mentors, and the ratios of availability for mentors for ECT teachers is almost on par with school teachers, which is a pretty mammoth effort. So you can just see the commitment to the process from the early childhood sector, which is fantastic. But mentors are really important. And you can see, that ability to be able to discuss and reflect on their practice is important. That helps them to understand their learners' needs, how they identify what those needs are and how they can best meet them. And really importantly, by working with somebody that's a bit more experienced, they can see what good practice actually looks like. And that's really important when you think about what they're endeavouring to do in move that practice from one level to another. When you can see, when you're learning anything, it's always a good way forward. If you can see what it looks like, then you're able to know what you need to do to sort of get there much easier. So it's really important that you do have mentors within your workplaces. Not every teacher in it needs to be a trained VIT mentor. Mentors don't have to all undertake the training, although it's advisable, because anybody that's got that training has a really thorough understanding of the process. But you will need to have somebody or access to somebody that is trained for you to undertake your workplace panels. We need to have somebody on the panel that is trained so that we can be assured that the process is being properly followed. So we're trying to make things as consistent as we can across the state. And I'll talk a little bit more about the panel further on if you've got questions about that. So if you are in a situation, you might be in a very remote area where there aren't a lot of teachers around, early childhood or otherwise. There are some options. So some people have very kindly completed the training and volunteered, and DET maintain a mentor map, so you can actually contact those people and ask if they would support your PRTs in those situations. And the department have also paid for the training of some mobile mentors through ACA Victoria, and you can see the contacts there as well. So their job is actually to support teachers that are in those rural and remote areas to be able to have access to a trained VIT mentor. And so there's some additional supports in addition to what was already spoken of today to support you in that process in finding mentors. So the inquiry approach, you can see it's a cycle. This is what it looks like. It's very similar to what you've probably seen before through the early years framework. And it's about making sure that their learner needs are at the heart of what they're actually doing. So really looking at their learners, thinking about what their needs are, and then based upon those, coming up with a question of inquiry that's going to lead them to an intervention that they can try, that they can see if they can actually try something to move their outcomes forward. Based with that as well is what some professional learning, so lots of observations and things are a really good idea at those times. Professional discussions about, you know, what would be the best approach to meet these learners' needs is really important at that stage. They'll need to then develop an action plan, which basically is a plan of the whole process, right from what sort of data sets they're relying on right through to how they're going to reflect. So all of those elements, and we've got templates available for people to use for these as well. They'll need to implement their action plan. So we say about 4 to 6 weeks if they see their learners regularly. It will take for them to teach the content, be able to try the strategies and gather the evidence that they need to demonstrate all of the descriptors. And then they'll obviously do an evaluation of, you know, did it work, did it not work, why not, and what's the next level of work moving forward. So mentors really guide the PRTs through this process. And at the end of all of this, they will write up their presentation in a format that's really up to them, but we do have templates that we suggest people use because it just makes the process a bit easier. But there is a sort of a format that we can provide you with, and that is then enables them to present their information to a workplace panel. The panel composition, same for both school and early childhood teachers. We want to make sure that it's a consistent process right across the state. A 3-person panel where at all possible. Early childhood teachers, leaders we know are not always fully registered teachers. To be on a panel, all panel members must be fully registered. So if you're a centre leader and you're not fully registered, you'll need to delegate that responsibility to an early childhood fully registered teacher. You'll need to have access to somebody who has done the mentor training. They can be either an early childhood teacher or school teacher. That's absolutely fine because the standards are the same for both, and similar for that 3rd person as well. So we get lots of early childhood centres that team up with local primary schools as well, particularly in rural settings, where they'll make up that panel, making sure they've got all of their fully registered teachers with some school teachers as well. And we have vice versa as well. We've had panels where early childhood teachers are on teacher panels. So there's some nice reciprocal arrangements going on out there. So as I said earlier, hopefully you have received the Code of Conduct and Ethics, the revised code that has come into operation in Term 3. It took us 2 years to do that revision. And that's now, as I said, in operation. The pack that came out is designed to assist leaders in workplaces right across the state to have the discussion about the code within their workplace. Now, of course, all teachers are subject to multiple codes. As you can see, you've got the Code of Ethics down there as well, which will be familiar to everybody, the Victorian public sector's code as well. But this code that I'm talking about is the one that we use as the regulator, and it covers all teachers from early childhood right up to senior secondary. So it's important that teachers know and understand that there are multiple codes. So when you're having those discussions about codes of ethics and code of conduct, that you talk about the fact that, that these codes are very complementary of each other, but there can be some differences. When we sent those support packs out to leadership, we included PowerPoint presentations, some teaching notes, some guidance packs, and some case studies and all sorts of different things. So that's all to assist people to have those conversations in the workplace, because it's much more meaningful when you're having these conversations within your context. And then you can talk to your staff about policy positions and things like that you have around certain issues that might come up. If you didn't receive one of those packs, I'll give you a mailbox where you can just put in your request for one, and I'll make sure that that gets out to you very, very quickly. So that's basically what our new code it will look like. It's a very high level document. It's remained that way. That was very important to teachers. We did lots of consultation right across early childhood teachers, school teachers, Metro Melbourne. We did a regional roadshow as well. We went all around the state. We had input from teacher groups, from parent groups, various other sectors, such as the Commission, the CCYP, Victoria Police, and even some young people themselves, some students themselves, obviously some older ones with this type of consultation. But it was really important that it was kept a high-level document, but teachers did ask for some more materials to help them engage with the code. And we found that case studies were really helpful. So we've developed a whole range of support materials, and we're still doing that. That's part of the ongoing work. And so on our website now, there is a code of conduct section, and we're constantly going to be updating that. So keep an eye on that for more resources as they come out. On the back of that, when they're doing their process of provisional to full, they'll also need to complete a professional responsibilities report. They'll have a conversation with their mentor about child safety and wellbeing. And of course, that will obviously centre around those provisions within the code, particularly part 3 that really talk about teachers' legal responsibilities as well. So it's really important that we know that our teachers are meeting all of those standards of proficiency. And also that they are aware of their legal obligations in regards to child safety and wellbeing. It's really important, as I said, that employers have a great understanding of the process and what is required. We have lots of employers that actually, leaders that come out and do the training just so that they've got a good understanding of what's required and how they can support as well. And this is something that teachers find really critical, that if the employer has that understanding and that knowledge around the process, and particularly around the importance of having mentors and things like that, it makes the process a lot easier for them. And don't forget about that additional support that's available through DET. There's a few more things that they talked about this morning as well, but I also wanted to draw your attention to those mobile mentors through Gowrie, and also the mentor map that's maintained through DET. Our new website has been launched. This might look very different to the VIT website that you've seen even last week, because this is only a couple of days old. And so it was a bit of a rush to get this slide in with the screenshots and things like that. But if you're looking for information about the process now, you go simply to register to teach, and then look down at the big mega menu that's there, down to moving to full registration. If you do have specific inquiries about the process, there is a mentors mailbox there that comes directly to my team. So it doesn't go to the big VIT mailbox or anything like that. It comes directly to the 3 members of my team, Matt Keever and myself, and we monitor that mailbox daily. So we'll be able to get back to you with a very timely response, and we do pride ourselves on getting back to you as quickly as we possibly can, because we know that it's critically important. We also do provide a mailbox for provisionally registered teachers, if they've got any queries during the process as well. So we're there to support both the mentors and the PRTs through this process if they do have any questions. And of course, you can avail yourselves of that support as well. And I'm just looking at the time and realising that it's getting on, but I think it was important that just I got through and just gave you that overview. As I said, we will be at the summit, so we'll be more than happy to have a chat to any and all of you about the process and what supports we can provide. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Linda. There was a question that came through from Rhonda. The 80 days that must be completed in a 3 or 4-year-old program. Is there any consideration for employed ECTs in a 0 to 2-year-old room, particularly those in CIT roles, to be enabled to include these teaching days? And
yes, there are. If you you'll need to contact us. So if you need to contact the professional practice team, and we'll just make note of that. But yes, that is possible, and that's a very good point actually that I neglected to mention. It's really important that workplaces do support people that are working as casual relief teachers. We do rely on them, obviously, to cover staff absences, but for all range of things, to release staff to do professional learning and those sorts of things. So it's really important that we do support them through this process as well.
Fantastic. Does anybody else have any questions for Linda?
Sorry, just to clarify on that. So, I mean, I'm really keen to know about this as a vet mentor, and with CRTs that call me, and their considerations are that they think that they have to do. And I've actually spoken to Matt at a fair bit of length on this, toing and froing. But so it is actually, they are allowed to do it in the 0 to 2s room. That's counted as part of their 80 days. And what about their inquiry approach?
The inquiry approach, it sort of depends on context and things like that. And we are looking towards a clearer position on that as well.
Okay.
I have been having similar conversations with Matt, probably on the back of the conversations you've been having with Matt.
Possibly. I'm just trying to raise it in as many forums, to be honest with you, Linda, because I think it's really, really important that we understand that we're trying to put so many teachers through the workforce strategy and trying to get them out there. And when they can only go into a 3 and 4 year old room, I'm a big advocate for them being able to do it in a 0 to 2 room as well, because it's possible. It's really practical, and they can cover off all of the Australian teaching standards.
Yes,
so
we're looking at
it's driving an agenda.
Yeah, we're looking at I guess a policy position that we're just looking to see where we can jump in that space. But we are on it, and we will get back to you on that one.
Perfect.
With that too, may I just also add something? Could part of the 80 days be in a management or educational leader support role?
It needs to be actually classroom teaching. So if you think about the process, it's about those 80 days as sort of that provisional period where people are moving their practice from that theoretical knowledge and understanding into being able to implement it in a classroom. And so they really do need to be teaching to be able to do that. Equivalence can come in, obviously, once you're fully registered and you can sort of, you've already demonstrated that proficiency. But for someone that's never demonstrated that proficiency before, it needs to be in a teaching context.
Sure. And also just going back to the question around whether the 80 days could be done in the 0 to 2 age group, maybe sharing with the attendees here, in New South Wales, it is already possible, isn't it, that they're actually advocating that ECTs are employed in the 0 to 3 age group as well. Well, 0 to 2,
I can't speak to other jurisdictions and things like that. We need to look at our policy positions, and that's a very political answer. We're very well aware of that. I can't believe that came out of my mouth.
But you are the Victorian Institute of Teaching, not the New South Wales Institute.
I'm a terrible bureaucrat. I'll be the first to admit it. But we need to look at our position, but we are looking at it and just seeing how we can clarify that situation for people, because we do know it's an issue.
Understand. Is there any sort of progress in the possibility of a national registration down the track?
That's something I can't comment on. That would have to be something for people that are in a higher pay grade than I.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you again, Linda, and also thank you to Emma and Kat, if they, Catherine, if they are still on board. I did thank them in the chat, but I think I just segued straight into Linda before without thanking them verbally. So if anyone else got any last questions before I cut it off? No? Okay, all right. Before we completely run out of time today, we have Paul Mondo, our Victorian Vice President and National President, who is going to give us an update on the ACA Advocacy.
Thanks, Sarah. And I will just get this slideshow running. All right, hopefully you should be able to see my screen right now. Thank you, everyone. You know that most of you know that I can't contain myself with words, so I'll do my best to keep within time here. So I suppose I wanted to reinforce beyond the range of supports that are available in Victoria for moving to full registration, particularly the grants that have been available over the last 18 months to support employers allow their provisionally registered teachers to progress to full registration, and that is, you know, to cover a whole lot of things, particularly backfill, to be able to allow those educators to do it, because I think, as someone noted in the comments, it is actually a really significant amount of work for those teachers to move from provisional to full registration. It's really hard to do if you're doing full-time and adding that in around all of your other stuff there. So, you know, to be cognizant of what's available to support those teachers from the government. And might I say, we are the only jurisdiction in Australia that has anything like that support to allow teachers to move into that. Is really, you know, it's really pertinent that you're aware and avail yourself of that. I believe that was, if I remember correctly, in Catherine and Emma's slides, I think there was a link to that funding predicament, but funding arrangement, sorry. So we will, obviously those slides will be circulated later and you can follow through from there. All right. All right, so national advocacy. I think most of you by now would be aware that that we've had the government, just leading up to the budget, announced some changes to the childcare subsidy. Those changes, in short, apply to children with more than one, families with more than one child in care, where the subsidy for the second child increases by up to 30%. To a maximum of 95%. So clearly, if you're a single child family, it doesn't benefit you. If you're a multi-child family and you're on 85% for the first child, you'll be on 95% for the second child. If you're on 55% for the first child, you'll be on 85% for your second child. So for the families that benefit from this, there are some really, really significant financial incentives for them to do that. And I think the other part that works with that is that the annual cap has been abolished. Now, that at this stage won't come into effect till 1 July 2022. So we have an annual cap for this year as it currently stands. Having said that, the legislation was tabled in Parliament in the last sitting week before the winter break, so that was late June. And we're really, really hoping that through August, it will probably go to some form of Senate inquiry, which we'll be a participant in. But we hope that the legislation can get through sometime in August, which actually may allow the government, with any little bit of hope, to potentially introduce some of those changes earlier than 1 July 2022, particularly things like the annual cap. So our ask has really been to bring that in by 1 January 2022. And we're hoping that there's we're hoping that can happen. I think what's important to note about that multi-child loading, it will only apply if there are 2 children under 6 participating. So if you have an older child who's in OSH and a second child who's in ECEC, the multi-child loading doesn't actually apply. We have asked for it to be included in that context, particularly for the child in ECEC, but as per the original announcement, there are some limitations there as to how they implement that. You would have noticed as well that there were some changes to provider eligible enrolments and simplifying that process to ensure that families are not left behind where they can't actually get access to paperwork to determine CCS eligibility. The department, DESI, has put out a whole range of emails around that recently, but clearly if you have families in those circumstances, we encourage you to look at that. I think one other huge thing that has recently changed from the 1st of July, you know, a real bugbear for many, many services where a child qualifies for ACCS, but the eligibility for CCS hasn't come till a number of weeks after they've started at the service, was that the CCS component was back paid to the family and effectively the payments were split. We've been pushing that for 3 years, effectively since the start of the CCS program, and from 1 July 2021, that is no longer the case. So if there is any back payments of CCS and ACCS, the payments are not split and the payments are delivered directly to the provider in that circumstance. So we've had some horror stories around the country of, you know, up to $10,000 or $15,000 being back paid to families and providers being left out of pocket in that context there. Beyond that, let's work through this nice and quickly. Preschool funding. I think we've been pushing for a number of years around the universal access arrangement to be extended for to a long-term commitment. In this budget as well, the government announced a significant, effectively an enduring commitment to funding preschool via a replacement to universal access. So really is a huge win. This is 5 years of work to get the government to make this commitment. There will be a slight change to the funding model, not necessarily to the quantum of dollars there. And there are a range of things, part of that is one of the reasons for the changes is that each state in Australia has implemented this funding vastly differently, noting that in Victoria, it's the best of any state in Australia into how it's distributed. What I will say is, whilst there won't be immediate changes in the first 2 years as to how funding flows, the government is introducing some performance criteria in relation to receiving this funding. The first of which is related to attendance at services, and the second will be around outcomes there. Now, this has only been broadly discussed. We're heavily involved with the federal department on what these things might look like in practice, noting that we're cognizant that there are a whole range of potential unintended consequences that might occur by things like performance measures for the funding, and how do you actually measure that successfully to ensure that funding isn't taken away, or that the funding drops because the criteria implemented are way too difficult to attain. So the tenure of the agreement is really strong. It really embeds funding for kinder in the year before school as a long-term government objective federally, which works very well in Victoria. And beyond that, we'll have to wait and see and work and advocate in relation to the measures that will be inserted into any agreement for providers to be adhering to, so that we're not left with a problem later on down the track. But that is an ongoing and active discussion right now, because these agreements need to be put in place prior to the beginning of next year for that funding to flow. So there's very intense dialogue between stakeholders and federal and state governments right now to ensure that the continuity of that happens in time. All right. Next one is, all right. And as I suppose the last main area for our advocacy report is something that has been a big discussion today around workforce. And I think, what we know is that there are no quick fix to workforce issues in our sector. There are problems with workforce, not just at a teaching level, but also at vocational level in terms of the supply of educators at this particular point in time. And we can say that around the country that the problem is not dissimilar. And I think there are two dilemmas: is how do we build supply for the future? How do we attract new people to study and take on courses so that they are considering our sector as a viable career alternative for them? And how do we fix the problem, the immediacy of where problems exist at this particular point in time? And then they're not the same problem, and there are different solutions required to do that. I mean, I think we know that we've lost, through COVID, a number of educators out of the system for a whole range of different reasons. And, that's presented us with this immediate dilemma. We know that completion rates for diplomas sit around 35%. So getting people to enrol is one thing. Then getting them to complete is another thing. Beyond the third problem, which is how do we ensure that the quality of those people finishing the range of qualifications is adequate for our sector to deliver high quality early childhood education and care. There is a range of things that we need to think about and work on. Skilled migration is a part of it, and certainly the National Skills Commission released its high priority occupations list recently. It was really quite curious because we disagree quite a lot with how they've categorised the need for various qualifications there, and so I think we're still working with trying to update that list, because that is one of the resources that's used for skilled migration to be assessed at this particular point in time. So if official government lists don't identify a shortage, and for one example is in Queensland, it hasn't deemed early childhood teachers as a high priority issue at this point in time, which in practice is completely removed from reality for most providers in Queensland trying to find teachers there. So there's some advocacy we're doing around that at this particular point in time to see if we can ensure that the urgency of it is in place. I think we need to try to find, as a sector, we've got a couple of things that we need to do. And I think, we can look to policy and we can look to a whole range of things, and that is absolutely critical to attracting and retaining staff. That policy frameworks are really critical there. And we're very lucky that we operate in Victoria, where the policy frameworks and support mechanisms, as was identified by the measures in Kat and Emma's presentation, none of those exist anywhere around the country. There is nowhere near that. And so you find that whilst we certainly have some challenges finding teachers in Victoria, it is maybe only about 20% of the challenges that are happening in other parts of the country there. So I think we have to acknowledge that things aren't as bad as they might be elsewhere, but that doesn't mean that they're easy for us, particularly with the expansion of 3-year-old preschool and obviously teachers being in greater demand moving forward. And I think, one of the things that we've been speaking about with DET here, as part of their work, the Victorian government's workforce strategy, is really, one scenario that I think as providers we can continue to do better is support practical placement and ensure that practical placement is of high quality, because there are large numbers of people who study the course, have a poor practical placement experience, and therefore don't complete their qualification. And so I think, practical placements are how our sector can grow and thrive. It is the most viable recruitment model that exists to be able to fill from the bottom up in services. And I think that's something that we really need to think about. Is the practical placement alternative provided in our service what it needs to be to ensure that prospective educators are supported in their placement? And this is a two-way street. Those students need to also give back. But I think that there's a whole range of inconsistencies around the state in practice, and that's actually captured through a whole lot of information through Victorian Skills Commission and the like there. We've asked for, so currently the Boosting Apprenticeship Commencement Scheme for trainees is only for this financial year. We've asked for that to be extended specifically for our sector beyond this financial year with the federal government. We believe there's a really good chance that would be the case. The Victorian government spoke to their pilot model with Deakin University for the degree, bringing it into 18 months. I believe that they're in negotiations with other tertiary institutions to be able to offer similar length degrees to support upskilling, the upskilling of diplomas into teaching degrees there. We think that's a really critical way of being able to, bring on teachers quicker, and also bring on people who have worked in our sector at a diploma or qualified level, who are familiar with working in a long daycare setting and the uniqueness of that particular environment, and noting that degree is also a birth to 5 degree as well. So it keeps children in the preschool space rather than into open. It keeps those educators in the preschool space rather than moving them, the potential of moving them into schools and school teaching program there. We've spoken, for regional and rural locations, there are a whole range of other complexities, and we've certainly, the Victorian government has some incentives there for that. We put the same ask to the federal government, particularly around HECS and HECS in that space. We've spoken about the skilled migration list and how we can do that. And look, one of the things that we're looking at is asking the government to develop a national advertising campaign to boost interest in our sector. I think, what is lost is the absolute potential for growth and progress in our space. You can start as a trainee and end up as a bachelor, move into area management, move into policy. There is so much potential for growth for people who don't necessarily think that they have that career progression. And I think that to the wider public, the understanding of what development opportunities exist within our settings is not necessarily well represented. I have been a part of the ACA Workforce Strategy Stakeholder Consultation Group. Whilst that process certainly wasn't perfect, I think that there are a number of potential initiatives within that strategy that are meritorious and certainly worth progressing. The strategy's been consulted on. The final draft has been released and will be presented to the Education Council, which is the state and federal education ministers, to determine whether they will support that and particularly whether they'll fund some of those activities in that space. Probably the only other thing to add today is you would have noted that there are a range of, or that we've been working through the Fair Work Commission around a work value case in relation to early childhood teachers. It has really almost resolved that case. There's final hearing dates coming through in the late August, but we've effectively worked with the unions on a consent position to changes to the award. And I think one of the things that's important to note in the context of those changes when we can actually advertise them with you, and it probably links very clearly to the registration process that Linda referred to earlier, is that unlike the current award where there's an annual progression in salary from one year to the other and that tenure determines that progression, the new categories in the award only have 5 levels, of which only four are basically attainable for most teachers in this space. Clearly, those levels have some improved pay in relation to that, so it's certainly not a backward step there. But to move from level 1 to level 2, a teacher must move from provisional to full registration. And so without that registration process taking place, those teachers can only remain at level 1 under the award. They must maintain their registration to move after that. And there's a whole range of other measures in the award that you'll see when it's actually confirmed by the Commission around that. Now, no one moves from there's not an annual progression in salary anymore. It's level 1 to level 2 has to take at least 2 years, realistically. And the same with level 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. There are 2-year windows before people progress from one level of the award to the other. Now, I would suggest that in Victoria, because of the way we're funded, because of the whole range of things, there are more likely to be more teachers paid well above the award than what there might be in other states in Australia. So the pay rates themselves may not necessarily be totally relevant, depending on your context and your service there. But clearly, there is a difference here in terms of how you use the award. And within the context of the award, there'll be a transition table in play for the first little bit to be able to say, well, my teacher is currently at level 9, which translates to level 3 or whatever the case may be. Please note, we will provide some education around that when the award is finalised and accepted by the Commission. Will run by ABLA in that context there. But it is in line with other professions where a registration process is in place, that you can't actually progress up the award unless it aligns with registration in and how you've achieved those particular outcomes. I think that one of the problems, and I think there was a question, I think that came from Shana around national registration. There was a recommendation around national registration when ACL did a review in 2018. The problem with national registration is no states or jurisdictions want to give up their own registration process to allow for a national registration to occur. And beyond that, not every state has a teacher registration process in place for early childhood teachers there. So there are some unique differences in how that plays out. I think one of the things that we would like to see, if not the same registration or a centralised or national registration, but at the very least a consistency in how registration is developed and maintained along the way. So you could probably live with the fact that there might be, different jurisdictions have different registration boards, but that the process that teachers undertake should be comparative across the country there. So, that's probably a more likely alternative than otherwise there. I'm just going to take a look at some questions in the chat to make sure I haven't missed anything there. Yes, Sian, go for it.
Just on that one, and maybe just to give you an example of the situation I am in at the moment, being that I've been a pre-service teacher, a registered pre-service teacher in Queensland for over 10 years now, and I just haven't had the time to sort of do my 80 days or however many days in the classroom. Then I've come here and I've got that VIT as well. But recently, just getting my registration in New South Wales, they've deemed me as not qualified in early childhood, despite that I actually got my initial teacher's registration from New South Wales. So I graduated from Sydney University, and this is the predicament I am in at the moment. And it just feels like every jurisdiction we're going into, there's a different rule. Yeah, I'm primary registered, but I'm not. And given that I've been in the sector for over 20 years, I'm still deemed as not qualified. So, yeah.
I did.
Consistency, yeah.
It is literally a dog's breakfast around the country. In South Australia, if you have a birth to 5 degree, you actually can't be registered there. So in Western Australia, if you're working in a long daycare setting, you can't be registered. So regardless of whether you hold a degree, so it is vastly different, and that is really problematic. It's something that we need to do, and honestly, in a profession where we know that there are shortages, trying to simplify some of these processes to ensure that there is some recognition of what works, particularly if it's been registered in the past, is crazy ultimately. So that work is ongoing advocacy for us around making sure that registration is at least consistent and achievable for everyone. Ultimately, assessing and performing to those standards is actually really wonderful at ensuring that teachers are improving in their practice along the way. So I think we should be looking at it as a positive for the sector and encouraging it where we possibly can, albeit it needs to be equitable and it needs to recognise where it was once recognised before. It needs to continue to be recognised in the future. I'm just going to answer a couple of questions that came out of the chat. So there's a question around immunisation. So a couple of things. We have asked for our sector to be prioritised for immunisation. We did that very early in the piece. We've continued to do that. Just yesterday, we also sent another letter off in relation to in the first instance, asking for our educators to be prioritised for access to immunisations. You will note, and I hope that you've all availed yourself of the information in Victoria where any educator working with a child with a disability, that is, qualifies for kindergarten inclusion support subsidy, or the like, and a template letter has been provided by DET, qualifies for the vaccine now. So I would encourage it, and I'm sure that we can recirculate that information. But I suspect in many services there are a range of children who qualify under, have NDIS, have ISS, have KISS funding, and any educator who has contact with that child actually can, as long as you provide a letter for them, can go and get the vaccine. So that is only available in Victoria. It's not available in any other part of Australia right now. In our letter yesterday, we asked if not all educators are prioritised and teachers in that sense, that we would that at least under phase 1B on the national process, that same exemption applies for people working with a disability, because anyone working with a child with a disability or an adult with a disability in any other setting qualifies for the vaccine federally, but it's not in ECEC. So there are a range of exemptions, and I think, to be clear, if you have a child like that in your service and you provide that letter for any of the educators willing to take it on, that they have they will be able to do that. Now, in practice, what we note is that doctors are far more sceptical of this, but the vaccination hubs are very accepting of the template letter provided via DET. Okay, so there is that opportunity there. I think the question here around higher wages and conditions. I mean, obviously the Victoria, which is the enterprise agreement, has a huge influence in Victoria on what the market sets as a rate for teachers. If I talk to my colleagues in other states who don't get $3,700 of per capita funding from their state government to deliver a preschool program, they would say, you're getting funded far above and beyond us, other than because they only have their daily fees to be able to help support some additional wages and conditions for teachers. So there are some unique circumstances, and a lot will depend on the scale of your service and how many children you have funded and how much that looks out. And I think there's a whole range of reasons that you need to, look at this in a totally contextual situation. And our argument with the Victorian government is really clearly is whilst most of our services would not be party to the Victoria has a direct influence on wages for teachers, even if they're not matched. They are, it's really hard to pay a teacher on a ward and maintain them in Victoria at this particular point in time. So, sure, that any increase in costs adds pressure to fees, adds pressure to other things, but let's be clear that in Victoria there is a whole range of funding that is the most any other state gets for funding is $1,300 a child to deliver a preschool program. So it's really uniquely different from one jurisdiction to another. In New South Wales, it's $400. In South Australia, virtually it's $1,500, but virtually nobody does it because the public system delivers free preschool. In Western Australia, preschool is delivered by schools, as it is in Tasmania. So we have a very unique set of circumstances, both from the way preschool is delivered in integrated programs in long daycare settings, and the support that the Victorian government puts up to help support those programs there. So it is thinking about how the maths works in your setting is something to consider in that space. But sure, that's something that we need to, that is always a pressure. Any increase in cost results in some pressure on fees, and that is going to be different. Different from one place to another. All right. Lockdown in Victoria, there's a question. There's no permitted worker arrangements in Victoria. Basically, all children are allowed to attend services at this particular point in time. There is no restriction on child attendance right now. It is parent choice at this point. I think what we'll note is there are no gap fee waivers currently in place in Victoria. If we look at the trend in New South Wales, gap fee waivers are introduced either in week 3 or week 4 of their lockdown. Keep in mind that one of the things that we had last year when we had gap fee waivers is we had a recovery payment to offset that gap fee waiver. Currently in New South Wales, there's no additional funding other than some business support payments that might sit around that, which are quite inconsistent and not everybody qualifies for, and also need to show a 30% loss in revenue to qualify for. So we're working really hard right now to try to say that if gap fee waivers are introduced again, that there are additional funding streams to help offset that, to allow service providers to actually implement gap fee waivers in place, because a gap fee waiver in its own right is, might work for a short period of time or with a short number of absences. So I think that's one of those things that's there. I think that's about it at this particular point in time. And I know we've gone way over our time. I thought I'd keep it tight, but apparently my history suggests that I can't do that. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Paul, maybe just, this is not a question, but just sharing with you the situation with the teachers as well. In terms of, I have in hand a handful of master sort of qualified early childhood teachers. At this moment, they're just not even wanting to take the responsibility of an ECT to deliver that quality program that we're wanting to do, despite being paid, 20-30% above award, being awarded additional holidays, and purely because of the challenges we face in a classroom. Say if there was at least that 1 or 2 child with additional needs, we have so much trouble getting the ISS funding, especially if we're needing it for more than that 5 hours a day. Just a raw example is a child with autism, and he really needed that one-on-one attention all the time. And because he climbs up high, he free falls, he runs out of the classroom. And we've had a lot of ongoing conversations with the department to get additional help, and that was just not possible beyond the 5 hours. And so the stresses the teachers go through, and then they say, then we're expected to write critical reflections to meet the exceeding themes, all the sort of responsibilities of the National Quality Framework, and then getting all these summative assessments through twice a year and so on. It feels just overwhelming. And so despite being offered additional pay, additional holidays, they'd rather take the back seat and be that sort of assistant in the room and not so this is a sector problem.
Oh, look, I mean, I think, no one disputes at the end of the day, the job is difficult. The job has its challenges, and really it needs all parts of the system, all funding provisions to work in combination to allow that to happen. And we're just we had our preschool room was the same last year in terms of having some really challenging behaviours in my own service, and we did have funding for for parts of it, but that's limited in its own right. And I think that that whole, how do you piece it together, and knowing that it changes from year to year depending on a group of children that you have or the work that's going, and ultimately the ever increasing requirements that the role is there. I mean, it is hard, and it's hard to get people to take on the responsibility if they don't want it. Equally, pushing them into a position where they're taking on responsibility under duress means they're probably not likely to succeed at that role anyway, because they're coming on it without the level of enthusiasm required to succeed. I think I'm sure we're all trying our best to support our teams, to allow for that guidance and mentoring and the framework around that as responsible employers, to ensure that we can minimise some of those things. I don't think there's anything that's foolproof, and I think that if we look at teachers in schools, many of them express the same concerns around, I can't cope, I've got all this work, I've got these behavioural challenges, and I've got all that sort of stuff. So part of it is the job. Doesn't help when, if a third of teachers aren't willing to take on the responsibility, that really is going to impact that whole scenario that plays out there. And, I think this very much is a site-by-site scenario. How do we put the framework in place? What support's there? And I mean, look, if there are problems with things, funding mechanisms like inclusion support and how that's working, I think they're they're real important conversations to have. And I suppose, Philippa, just as an idea, one of the things we might be able to do is really talk to Victorian Inclusion Support scheme around what other supports we can prepare, and what are the processes that we need to be able to maximise the support that we need, whether that is extra staff or whether it's other resources or things that we can put in place. So that might be another scenario, because it is a growing problem.
Yeah, and on that as well, I mean, with this particular scenario, even the what do you call allied health, the speech pathologists and all the other sort of people that we engage to support this child, we found that they were not trained enough to understand the childcare sector, and that was inherently a problem, because the strategies they provided us later on when we asked them, because for example, this child would eat everything in the classroom, and then and we had to remove all sorts of risk in the environment, and then they suggested, how about crush up Cheerios to put in the sandpit. I'm thinking, like, how do you do this? And so when we challenge them, it'd be like, oh, we didn't know. So it really, I mean, so it seems like the support is there, but it's not quite there. Another, maybe on a different topic regarding the traineeship as well. and the apprenticeship is that I believe my understanding is and we're trying to attract people from other sectors to come into the sector. But if they already have a higher qualification than the diploma, then they can't use it, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That kind of is a purpose as well. So if that could be if our sector is a priority and if that could be relaxed, perhaps we might have greater success. I'm just bringing it out there.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. Because sometimes people need to move sideways first before they move up. And, you know, I think that would be a really practical solution there. So
at the moment, there is also a limitation because with RTOs being granted the funding to offer the traineeship and apprenticeship as well, the funded program. So at the moment, the only RTO we know of that kind of comes and does all this is Selma, but we know that there are other RTOs wanting to get the funding, and the government's not allocating it to any new RTOs as well. So there's that limitation.
Yeah. I think we can work with that as some future information to get out to members around that. So we'll take note of that and use that in some comms and see what we can do to share who else is involved.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sarah, anything else to add at all?
No, nothing else to add, but if anyone else has any questions that they would like to ask,